Likkutei Torah, Drushim for Shabbat Shuva, page 128. Ois Beis. Yesterday we learned that there's a level of Yaakov in Yisrael. Yaakov is bringing down the Yud into Akev, into the lowest level. Yisrael, on the other hand, is, like he says, no, we skipped that part. Okay. Basically, there's Shemayim and Oretz, just like you have Yichudei Lo, but Shemayim Mimal V'Oretz Mitochas, Yichudei Lo, Yichudei Tato. The same thing in Aveda Sa'adam, there is the Mamata L'mayla, Mamayla L'mata. That's what we're up to. So he says now, V'nei Ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, V'yad Kolam V'yiplo Apaneihem, the whole nation fell on their faces, and they said, Avayu Elikim Beis Pamim. This is the story of Eliyahu and Har Carmel, you know, when the fire came down from heaven. It says everybody saw the fire coming down from Hashem, and they screamed, Hashem Hu Elikim, Hashem Hu Elikim. So he says, let's skip the parentheses.
I'm sorry, Rabbi, what was that story?
There was 400 non-Jewish prophets, idol-worshipping prophets, and there was Eliyahu Navi all alone. And Eliyahu Navi said to them, why are you, to the Jews, why are you in the middle, neither here nor there? Let's prove once and for all if the Baal, the idols are God or the Hashem. So he said, we're going to build an altar, and no fire, no nothing. Whoever gets their God to bring a fire down on the altar, they're the real God. So he said, you guys go first. You're 400, you go first. So they built this altar, they were screaming, ripping their hair out and screaming, fire, Baal, help, but nothing happened. It was mincha time, Eliyahu Navi went over, he poured water on the Mizbeach 3 times, and he said, God help me, once and for all, just. So fire came down from heaven, and it lit the whole Mizbeach. So people screamed, and they said, Hashem hu Elokim, Hashem hu Elokim. But he said it twice. So now the Rabbi is asking, why did they say it twice? Why isn't once enough? Hashem or Elokim, we have to say it twice for it. Love and Lamakaflu Beis Pamim, why did they say it twice? So he says, there's 2 meanings of the word Hashem is Elokim. It could be 2 things. Aleph is Shavayu Gili Ern Baruch Hu Bechinas Hamshachav is Pashtus. There's one level is Havaya, which means the revelation of Elokus. Hamshachav is Pashtus, like Yud is symptom, then you have Hey as his Pashtus, length and width, and then Vav is bringing it down. Zoli is called as Savas or Atzmei Olikim. That if it's symptom, Shemitzamtum Elam is Nefradim Baligvul. It says like this. One interpretation is Havaya represents the infinite level of God. Right? Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So this level of revealing Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, coming into Chochmah and Bina and the 6 spheres and Malchus, right? That is Elokim, that's really a symptom compared to God. In other words, even though Havaya is infinite, but really compared to Hashem, this level of Havaya is really Elokim, it's a limitation, because Hashem is infinitely above that. That's one meaning. But if it's chalkas madregas in the division of levels, minim, sheinim in different levels, shatzim tzimazeh. This tzimtzum tzimtzum gadol. Even coming into, let's explain like this. Even Atzilus, which is a world of Eitzel, close to Hashem. It's a Gilead. It's Chochmah V'Elokus, Bina V'Elokus, right? In essence, it's really infinite. Atzilus is infinite Chochmah, infinite Bina, infinite Chesed, infinite Gvura. Okay, so it's infinite. Nevertheless, the fact that it's divisible by 10, it comes down into 10 levels, compared to the level of Elokus, which is really infinite, it's a very big symptom. So he's saying Havaya, which represents here, he's saying like the 10 spheres, right? Yud is Chochmah, Hey is Bina. So he says, that level of Havaya, even though it's Havaya, it's really Hu Elokim. It's really a symptom compared to Hashem. It's a concealment. It's hiding.
There is not any physicality that they cannot...
Natsilis? No.
They cannot exist.
No. Even in the any of the four spiritual worlds, there's no physicality.
Really?
No, there's no physicality. It's all spiritual. There's four spiritual worlds, right? Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya. Even Asiya, the lowest, is all spiritual. Then it comes down into physical Asiya. Over there you can have physical entities. In the spiritual world, there's only spirituality. The difference between one level and the next is how much revelation there is versus how much concealment there is. Neshamas come from Atzilus, so they have a greater revelation than the angels who come from Bria and Yetzirah.
So the matter has been formed in the lowest level.
Correct. Not only in the lower spiritual level, in the physical world of Asiya.
Asiya is
The action world.
physical action.
Yeah,
How
correct.
can it not be,
No, but there's a spiritual Asiya too.
I'm sorry?
There's a spiritual Asiya, which is spiritual, but it's a very low level, a very minimal understanding of godliness. Bam, it's this level. Nevertheless, it is Havaya Sheidei Zanim Shebechinas Havaya. That causes the revelation of Havaya. Lahav is Kola Asavis Miyayin Liyesh. This Tzimtzum, granted it's a big concealment compared to Hashem. So why did Hashem do it? Because in order to create a low world, Yesh Miyayin, there has to be that spiritual Tzimtzum of infinite becoming partial infinite, so to speak, and then becoming finite. Shabbat, they had Tzimtzum. Without the Tzimtzum, Elam is cloud, there wouldn't be worlds at all. And then there would be B'Telim, B'Mkeim, everything would be nullified. They wouldn't be. B'Mkeim, Gamat Tzimtzum, Hu Havaya. So therefore, the Tzimtzum, what we're saying is like this. Havaya is Elokim. That means, even Havaya, which is, creator, that is also the level of Elokim. But why did there have to be this symptom for Havaya to come down? For there to be created a world. That's the first definition. Pirish Hasheni, Kibechinas Havaya Vamshachas Chesed. This level of Yud Kevavke and bringing down of Chesed. Shemahava Kol Havayas that creates everything. Shal Shem Zen Nikra Havaya. Loshen Hoive. Yud Kevavke, okay, is Hoive with a Yud at the beginning. Laheru Shemahava Tomid. Hari Bechina Zu is only a Elokim et Symptom. Legabe Atzmusi Muhusi is Barak Aviyachos. He says like this. The first definition of Havaya Elokim means in order to create a world, there has to be tzimtzum. There has to be the symptom to create worlds. Second is that all these levels of tzimtzum are really Havaya. He says, is only Elokim et Tzimtzum, the Gabat Smus is Bar Kaviyach. Like it says, Ani Havaya Ushmi, that Havaya, even Havaya is only the name. The Pasuk says, Ani Hashem Hushmi. That means even Yudke Vavke is only a name. That's even a concealed level. So one level of Havaya Elokim means Havaya comes into Elokim. In order for that to happen, in order to have a world, so Havaya has to be limited. The second thing he's saying is that even that level of Havaya that comes down is also a limitation compared to Hashem.
So the limitation is Havaya.
Correct. Havaya is a limitation. Correct. One way of looking at it is emphasis on Havaya or in Elokim. What is Havaya or Elokim? That means Havaya is a tzimtzum. Even that is a limitation. Second way is Elokim is really Havaya.
If the Simpson is blocking the Havaya, it must be stronger than Havaya. Otherwise, how would you be able to Simpson?
the difference between, let's say, Havaya infinite and Elokim finite, yeah? Supernatural, natural. Correct? Those two levels are only what they are compared to down here. From Hashem's perspective, there's no Havaya and there's no Elokim. It's Anechi. The essence of Hashem is higher than infinite, higher than finite. Because if he's only infinite, that itself is a limitation that he's infinite, not finite. Right? And secondly, if he is only infinite, how in the world can he create finite? So therefore Hashem himself is above both. Now how can you have Havaya and Elokim coexisting if they're opposites? One is infinite, one's finite, one's natural, one's supernatural. You can't have two opposites coexist.
In different realms,
but they're the opposites though. One is limited, one's unlimited.
They don't relate to each other.
And not only do they both exist, we're saying it's the same thing. Havaya Elokim. So the answer to that is, because compared to the higher level, the nameless level of Hashem, because even a name, he's going to say now, when a name of a person is not the essence of the person. But when you call the name, he turns to you. Yeah? But a name is not the essence. Correct? So, these two names, Havaya and Elokim, which are opposite, they're only opposite in their realms of definition of finite and infinite. Finite and infinite are two opposites. But in the level above both, then they're not opposites. They're both equal there. So, like we learned, Anechi Hashem Elokecha. How could Havaya become Elokecha? How could the infinite become your finite? The answer is because there's something called Anechi, which is higher than Havaya, which is a name. Havaya is a name, Elokim is a name, right? So how is it possible to have finite and infinite simultaneously? Havaya becoming Elokecha, that Havaya, which is infinite, becomes your internalized level, your nature. That's because of Anechi. We have that hundreds of times a day, at least 100 times a day, when you say, Baruch Atah Havaya Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. Now, what does that mean? That Havaya becomes Elokeinu, and through that it becomes Melech HaOlam. Not only in us, it becomes in the world, right? That we affect the world. Whether it's a mitzvah that we're doing, bringing Kedusha into the world, or even if you're eating a food that you're making a bracha on, so you bring Kedusha into that kosher food that you're making the bracha on. Right? Now, how could Havaya become Elokeinu? Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. How could Yud Kei Vav Kei Hashem infinite become Elokeinu? Because before that we say Atah Hashem Elokeinu. Atah is like Anechi, first person, second person. But Atah is the nameless level of Hashem, which is above Havaya and above Elokeinu, and therefore Havaya could become Elokeinu. Or it could become Chosher, Chosher could be Or. It's all these limitations of the definition of what something is only once in the realm where it's becoming defined. But it's Keldeus Hashem. It's from Hashem's perspective also. Hashem has a perspective that makes our perspective exist.
But from his perspective, everything is Anochi.
From Das Elyon, we say Kel, there's a pasuk in Shmuel, we say in Haftarah in the first day of Rosh Hashanah. Kel De'os Hashem. The God of De'os, plural. What that means, so Chassidus explains, There's Das Elyon and there's Das Tachten. There's Hashem's perspective and there's our perspective. But our perspective, Kel Dayais, is Hashem. It's coming from Hashem. Because Hashem didn't have that level of our perspective, we couldn't have our perspective. It means Hashem is allowing, and Torah says, Bereshis bara Elokim, yesh miyayin. Torah says, Torah's emes, yesh miyayin. From Hashem's perspective, everything is nothing. The answer is, from Elokim's perspective, it's bara. From Elokim, which is the name of Hashem, which is the power of limitation that Hashem has, from Elokim's perspective, there is a world. Bereshit bara Elokim. Elokim created a world.
You're saying Hashem has this multi-perspective?
Correct. Kel Dayos Hashem. But the real perspective, which is the role of the Jew, Hashem made from Elokim a world. Our function is to make the Elokim back into the Yesh, back into Ayin. What is Ayin? Elokus. Where everything is bottled.
Then the world will not exist.
The world will exist. It will. The world will exist with the realization that the world... Okay, let me ask you a different question. What's closer to God? Physical or spiritual?
Spiritual knows God. Physical
No.
knows it.
What's closer to Hashem?
Action.
So, if you ask a normal person in the street, even a religious Jew in the street, very religious Jew in the street, doesn't know what it is, they'll tell you that spiritual is closer to Hashem than physical. Spirituality is Torah, mitzvahs, you know. But that's a normal person would say. But then again, then you're limiting Hashem that he's closer to spiritual than to physical. The truth is, for Hashem, just like spiritual is batal to Hashem, right? Atzilus Hayin, that is batal to Hashem. This world is also batal to Hashem. What did Hashem do? He covered himself with himself. He covered himself with himself. That means, even though it's not really a covering because he's covering himself with himself, but Hashem's infinite greatness and that we can't understand at all, just like we can't understand infinite in the essence of God. We can't understand, as Alter Rebbe says, we can't understand his power of limitation. Hashem limits himself covers himself with himself, and yet it looks as if it's not him. In other words, to use a fancy one-liner, Tzimtzum means Hashem is where he isn't. Now we can be is where we ain't. We can't be where we're not. Because we're limited. You either are or not. Where Hashem isn't limited, then he is where he isn't. So Hashem made that Tzimtzum. Now, that Tzimtzum is for us to untzimtzum it. The purpose why Hashem made the world yesh mi'ayin is to make adir b'tachtein. Means to make the yesh back into ayin. Now when Mashiach comes, to answer your question, sir, Mashiach comes, Gashmias is going to reveal a deeper level of godliness than Ruchnius ever did.
The ray of the sun.
1 second. I'm impressed that you have a difficulty understanding it. It's something that's impossible to understand. So don't worry about your difficulty.
The ray of the sun is this when it leaves the sun.
Correct.
The moment this ray gets closer to sun, it disappears.
No, in the sun it disappears. In the sun it disappears. No, it doesn't disappear. It's there. The whole thing in Shoyach Vamunah, the Alter Rebbe says, if the ray could shine millions of miles away, in the sun for sure it exists. But it doesn't exist as a ray, it exists as the sun. But it's on the contrary, it's a stronger ray there than outside of the sun, but over there it doesn't feel a separate thing called a ray, because when the ray leaves the sun, it doesn't feel the sun. That's why it's a ray. Makes sense? If you understand this, you need your head examined, because it's impossible to understand.
But this definitely makes sense, because the ray inside the sun, of course, is going to be more stronger than the coffee. Just like a coffee.
Alukus, lifnei atzimtzum, it's coffee. Okay.
What happened when the Hashem got close to the Jews with Moshe? They disappeared.
No, they didn't.
They didn't exist.
They didn't exist, that's what I'm saying. It didn't exist as a separate entity separated from Hashem.
Right, that's it's okay, so they will be...
A Rebbe is in the world of Atzilus down here. Doesn't mean he doesn't exist. He exists.
A car cannot exist. It gets closer to HaKadosh.
What do you mean it can't exist? It can't exist as a separate entity.
Right. So
But it can exist as Hashem.
Yeah.
Okay, so the car doesn't disappear. The car's existence is Hashem.
You have to exist to be bottled. If you don't exist, there is no concept of bottle. You have to break it to be bottled to Hashem. Existence must be...
In today's parasha, in fact, in today's chitas, Reeh nosatu v'nach hayem esachayim v'samavis esateva avesara ubacharta b'chayim. Hashem said, look, I'm giving you life and death, good and bad, choose life. Yeah? So the question, which idiot is going to choose death? Torah has to tell you, hey, guess what, guys? I'm giving you a choice of life and death. Choose life. That's, we're not talking about the physical life. We're talking about choose, and that's very difficult. Choose spirituality, choose godliness. When you're connected to Hashem, then you're Chayim, because Hashem is the only real existence that will exist. So when a Jew connects to Hashem, so then they become that godly level. But again, there's a misconception. Gashmis is not further from godliness than Ruchnius is, and therefore just like Ruchnius can exist, Gashmis can exist. When Mashiach comes, okay, V'ro kol basar kipi Hashem dibur. If the whole flesh will see God speaking, the Rebbe Rashab says, basar as basar. The Pasuk doesn't say all people will see. All neshamas will see. Basar means meat. V'ro kol basar, meat, physical meat will see its godliness. That means not that when Mashiach comes, we're going to bang into the wall because we don't see it's only godliness. When the Alter Rebbe says that when I look at the beam of the building, I don't see a beam, I see a lokus. Yeah? That doesn't mean that the Alter Rebbe banged into the wall. He didn't see the wall as a separate entity. The Alter Rebbe once says, it was after Rosh Hashanah, the Alter Rebbe asked him, his son, the Mittel Rebbe, with what did you daven? Like, what were you meditating in? So he told him whatever it was. So he said to his father, in Mitvosas to daven, and with what did you daven? So the Alter Rebbe answered with the stender.
What?
With the stender. That's a stender. A podium. What do you mean the Alter Rebbe daven? Yeah, he didn't mean he put his machzor on the podium. He davened with the concept that the physical object is Elokus. That the whole avoid of a Jew is dir with Tachteinim, to show that the Tachteinim, the lowest of levels, is really Hashem's home. It's really one with Hashem. That's the avodah of the Jew. And every time a Jew makes a bracha, every time a Jew does a mitzvah, that's what happens.
The handkerchief in his hand when he was doing the Maamar.
When the Rabbi said a Maamar Chassidus, yeah, it was clear. I mean, the Rebbe shoved it openly. The Rebbe put it under the, before the Maamar, the Rebbe would take a handkerchief, wrap it around his hand, but the Rebbe kept it under the tablecloth. Nobody should see. I mean, it was obvious. It was clear. Because they needed something physical to hold themselves down. What levels mean you? Okay. I think today was Aka Vietnam. I think today was